Board Member Tom Miller and the story of the Blood Brothers and their impact on Appleton and beyond. Tom is a current board member of the society, and he and his lovely wife are the owners of Appleton's oldest house. Born and raised in Appleton, he and his wife currently reside in Greenville, but we don't hold that against him. After 40 plus years in the window and door industry, Tom sold his business in April of this year and retired to a life of leisure until the Historical Society decided to buy a new building in May. Most days you will find him at 231 West Franklin Street working on various projects to prepare for the opening of the new Appleton History Museum. So without further ado, Thomas, where are you? Oh, there you are.
Right behind you.
It's all yours.
All right, who here has heard of the Blood family? Several. Well, I hope within the next 3.5 hours we can fill you in on all the rest of the details here. So we're going to talk about the Blood brothers tonight. In the month of May, in the year 1846, a solitary horseman was pursuing his way from Green Bay toward Oshkosh. He passed beyond the thinly settled regions of the old French claims, and all about him were primeval nature. As he rode on, gazing at the delight upon the beauties of the ever-varying landscape, he involuntarily reined his horse to a full stop as a scene of surpassing magnificence met his view. He stood upon the fresh richness of spring, stretched far away on either hand. Before him, broad and deep, between high green banks, rolled the clear waters of the Fox River to where they poured their vast volume over natural fall, making the grand chute. Thence ran, hurrying and boiling down a long succession of rapids. It was a scene fit to inspire an artist's mind with the deepest enthusiasm, and to call beautiful visions to the imagination of the poet. Although he was fully conscious of the rare beauty of the sight, our horseman, being neither poet or artist, took a utilitarian view of the prospect before him. Upon his mind, indelibly impressed himself as the most perfect position for a city. Little did he then think that this would be one of the founders of that city, today be living there, beholding what he now sees. That horseman was Colonel Henry LeVake Blood. So, who are the Blood brothers? Colonel Henry LeVake Blood, his brother Colonel James Clinton Blood, and Newman Clark Blood. So, if these gentlemen are so worthy of our recognition, why are not immortalized by the city? Surely they should have a street named after them, a park in their honor. Possibly the name is macabre, is Blood. Perhaps other names are better suited for our landmarks. Blood Street, Blood Park, etc. You know, a long time ago, Herb Park swimming pool was called the Bird Bath. Possibly we can call it the Blood Bath. So how did I come across the Bloods? The Bloods have ties to our Appleton Oldest House project. And I'm convinced due to the size of the city at the time and the ties between the owners that the Bloods have been at our house on 5th Street, either socially or for business reasons. And I've also felt a kinship to them, and through the power of the internet and FamilySearch.org website, I find that I'm a 7th cousin 4 times removed. Therefore, we truly are blood relatives. Well, several hundred years before the Appleton Bloods, one of their ancestors made a name well known, perhaps for the wrong reasons. Thomas Blood was an Irish adventurer and soldier of fortune, and most famously known for his audacious attempt to steal the crown jewels of England in 1671. Born in Ireland in 1618, Blood initially served in the English Civil War and later became involved in various plots and schemes against the English government. By the late 1660s, he developed a reputation as a rogue and a master of deception, capable of both violence and cunning. His discontent with the English monarchy, combined with his rebellious spirit, led him to hatch a bold plan to steal the crown jewels from the Tower of London. Blood's plot was to steal the crown jewels, with meticulously planned and executed with remarkable daring. Disguising himself as a parson, Blood befriended the jewel house keeper, Talbot Edwards, over several visits. On May 9, 1671, Blood and his accomplices convinced Edwards to show them the jewels. Once inside, they attacked him, gagged him, and attempted to make off with the jewels. The thieves then planned to smash the imperial crown with a hammer and fit it underneath their cloak. However, their escape was thwarted when Edward's son unexpectedly arrived and raised the alarm, and the conspirators were captured. In a surprising twist, Blood was not only spared execution, but he was also pardoned by the king, Charles II. Some believe his leniency was due to Blood's charm and audacity, which reportedly amused the king, while others speculate that Blood may have had valuable information or connections. Remarkably, Blood was even granted land in Ireland, which allowed him to live out his life in relative comfort until his death in 1680. So our Blood brothers were the children of Giles and Fanny LeVake Blood. Giles was in the lumber and iron business in Oxford County, New Hampshire, then moving his family to Bolton, Vermont, and finally to Jay, New York. His experience as a merchant was passed on to his son James and Newman, but Henry preferred the hotel business. Colonel Henry LeVake Blood was born December 27th in 1813 in Oxford, New Hampshire, the eldest of Giles and Fanny LeVake in the town of Hanover. Henry received a fairly liberal education in the common schools of the neighborhood. He assisted his father in farming during the summers. Henry married Miss Teresa Catherine Southmaid on April 25th, 1838, and together they had 3 children. It's believed that he was a schoolmaster in the northern New York and Vermont area, where he was expected to be a person in that position would know more than everyone except the clergyman. Seized with Western fever, in 1843, he traveled to the Great Northwest Territory. He stopped in Detroit, Michigan Territory for a time, visited Sault Ste. Marie, and then in 1844, he took up residence in Mackinac, Michigan, where he filled the office of sheriff for a part-term. It was there he opened up a hotel called the Westcott House. He ran this until 1846. On May 7th, 1846, he took up residence in Green Bay in the Wisconsin Territory. In that season, he explored the entire Fox Valley all the way as far as Winneconne. He became manager of the Astor House in Green Bay, property of the prominent John Jacob Astor, a fur magnate and philanthropist who founded the American Fur Company. Astor was the first multimillionaire in the United States. Astor's great-grandson, John Jacob Astor IV, died on the Titanic and was considered one of the richest people in the world at the time. Henry Blood is credited with starting the first hotel in Oshkosh in 1847. He remained there for a year before returning back to Green Bay and again taking on his role as the manager of the Astor House. James Blood's settlement in Appleton paved the way for Henry to become an agent for Lawrence for the construction of the Rose School. On August 4th and 5th of 1848, Blood, along with Reeder Smith, William Sampson, and a surveyor, laid out the original plot of Appleton, which was duly recorded January of 1849. A letter from Reverend William Sampson, who was the principal of the new school, gives us this information about the developments in this period. And I quote, "On the 8th of September, 1848, I began to cut away the thick underbrush and soon had a road cleared from the old Indian trail on the river bank to the block in which Mr. Brewster's beautiful residence now stands. I cleared off the brush and the necessary preparations were made for the erection of the building in the center of that block. Colonel Blood soon had a bill of timber as per agent's order. Cut a road through the dense forest to Duck Creek, where the agent had engaged the lumber, employed the teams, and soon was doing land office business. A towering pile of lumber was on the ground. He goes on in detail, letting the contract and describing the building of 4 stories high with dimensions of 70 by 30, and the first story being of stone, the others of wood, and topped by a cupola. And this is the building that was presently located, or was formerly located on the present site of the YMCA in Appleton. That same year, Henry Blood built the first shanty in Appleton, enlisting the John F. Johnston family to move in to board the men who were working on the college building. And the Johnsons moved into that shanty before the roof was even finished. With the erection of this building, settlers came pouring in so that it was finished in November of 1849, that there were in Appleton the beginnings of a village. Henry had brought his family to settle permanently in March of 1849 and set up a store in addition to working on behalf of the college. He worked hard at establishing the college, and in 1851 was appointed financial agent for the school, a position he retained for 15 years until he retired to his former interest, the hotel business. Lawrence Institute was soon changed to Lawrence University, and for the first half dozen years of its existence, he was its treasurer. And for 8 more years, one of its trustees. He also kept some years a boarding house to accommodate some of the students. Very soon after the first settlement, home government was organized, and the town of Grand Chute in the old Brown County became a reality. Henry Blood was unanimously chosen as the first chairman. The town then embraced all the territory now comprised in the city of Appleton, the present towns of Grand Chute, Greenville, Dale, Ortonia, and part of Waupaca County. While he did engage in merchandise, farming, and lumbering business at various times, his natural forte was that of an innkeeper. John Johnston wrote about the first winter in 1848. I quote, "Christmas Eve, we celebrated at Ezra Thurber's. Newman Blood took the ox and sled, put in a lot of straw, and loaded all the men, women, and children of the settlement. And a jollier load could not be found that Christmas anywhere. The spirit of St. Nicholas possessed us all, even the oxen." In 1849, Henry contracted to carry the mail from Menasha to Green Bay, establishing a daily stagecoach. He also carried passengers to Menasha via a daily rowboat. In 1850, he built the first footbridge across the Fox River at a cost of $120. It was the only bridge for the next 2 years. Henry's first wife died in 1855. Several years later, he married Mary Brown, with whom he had 2 children. John S. Prescott, who was the chief money raiser for Lawrence University, and Henry Blood was the first resident agent and steward. In early 1852, they adopted a building plan, which would be for the main hall, and authorized the resident agent, Henry Blood, to contract for the quarrying and drawing of the stone and burning of the lime and delivery of the square timber. And this is a letter that Henry discusses that contract with Andrew Gill for the construction of the main hall in 1863. It's believed that the LeVake Hotel was started in the 1850s by a man remembered only as Mr. Hoyt. Henry Blood took over in 1864 and named the hotel for his mother's family. He leased the hotel to John Johnston sometime around 1871. He then became engaged in the extensive lumber operation and for 2 years ran a sawmill in Shiocton. And due to poor management by his business partners, it was a financial failure, and Henry opted to retire. Colonel Blood was a very decided Democrat until the repeal of the Missouri Compromise. And he was one of the enthusiastic free state men who went to Kansas determined to rescue the prospective state from the border ruffians of Missouri. Returning home after many adventures, we next hear is accompanying the 21st Regiment Wisconsin Infantry Volunteers into Kentucky and Tennessee and thereafter home again, where he found he could not endure the rigors of the climate. His title of colonel came from his appointment on the military staff of Governor Barstow in 1854. In 1864, Henry Blood was elected the presidential elector from the state of Wisconsin, and he was to carry the vote to Washington for the re-election of Lincoln. The hotel business was still in his blood, and soon he was back at it again. He took over the Axtell House on South Water and Ferry Streets in Milwaukee in November of 1880, and he kept this shortly before his death. From 1882 to 1883, Henry was the proprietor of the Briggs House in Appleton. He was also involved in the Edgerton House on College Avenue. Henry Blood was buried at Riverside Cemetery in Appleton, marked by a humble headstone. He died on Tuesday, February 21st, 1888, at the age of 74. His obituary stated, "He was a peculiar man, always reserved and undemonstrative. He did not really make many friends, but his friendships were enduring. A marked characteristic of a man that was in fact that rarely dropped a derogatory remark against anyone. Of course, it is too much to say that he did not have his dislikes as well as his likes, but the former were so rare as to excite surprise when one considers the eventful life that he led during the last 40 years. Colonel James Blood was born March 21st, 1819 in Bolton, Vermont. We believe he was the first of the Blood brothers to arrive in Appleton in the summer of 1848. He purchased land in the northwest quarter of Section 26, cleared some 10 acres of land and sowed wheat, and along with his brother Newman and Robert Morrow, they operated the first dry goods store on College Avenue, Blood and Morrow. James Blood married Eliza Jane Manser in February of 1852, and together they had 6 children. James Blood moved to Kansas in 1854 at the request of Amos Lawrence and the New England Immigrant Aid Society. The purpose of this body was specifically to flood the entire territory with northern immigrants so that the southern sympathizers could be outvoted to ensure Kansas became a free state. Blood was not only a very successful businessman, he was the first mayor of Lawrence, Kansas in 1857. He was elected county treasurer in 1863, served on the Kansas legislature in 1874. And at the time he built this beautiful home on Tennessee Street in Lawrence, the city directory listed him as occupation as a bricklayer. Ironically, Blood is credited with rebuilding most of Lawrence, Kansas after Quantrell and his raiders destroyed the city during the border wars. James' son, Thomas Blood, is credited with carving his initials in the brick. On August 21st, 1863, much of Lawrence was burned and between 160 and 190 men and boys were killed. By all accounts, Blood should have been the first one to be killed. He managed to hide from his attackers and he survived this horrific event. James Blood, now known as General Blood, after his commission of Major General during the Civil War, died February 4th, 1891 in Lawrence, Kansas. James Blood was a significant character in the founding of Appleton and Lawrence University in Appleton, but most important were his contributions to the state of Kansas, the city of Kansas, and the University of Kansas, which was originally Lawrence University of Kansas. He served on the Kansas legislature and later was director of the Kansas State Historical Society. For those not familiar with the border war and the Free State movement, I encourage you to look into it. It makes for some really interesting reading. Newman Blood, the third brother, is a bit of an enigma. He was born in Vermont in 1817. It's presumed that he moved with James to Wisconsin in 1848. By this time, he was already a widower. Newman's first wife, Martha Southmaid, was born in December of 1860. She died August 1842 in Essex County, New York. It's unclear whether Martha is a relative of Henry's wife, Teresa Southmaid. Same last name. I have not been able to find a connection between the two families. Newman emigrated to Kansas at the same time as his brother James, and Newman set up a store along the Santa Fe Trail near Baldwin, which is a little south of Lawrence. It's here that Newman met his second wife, Matilda. Newman and Matilda married in 1861. Matilda's first husband, Thomas Barber, was a Free State settler shot and killed during the Wakarusa War and was memorialized in John Greenleaf Whittier's poem, The Burial of Barber, which became an anti-slavery call to arms. Matilda died in 1902. Together they had one daughter. The Honorable Newman Blood died in October of 1876 at the age of 59. He served in the legislative department, ordnance, public debate, finance, taxation committees in the 1859 Kansas Convention. But compared to his younger brother James, Newman was virtually silent during the course of the convention's formal hearings. Although not as vocal as his brother, Newman was actively involved in the formation of the state of Kansas. He served as Justice of the Peace in 1863. He seems to have had a long history of health issues. He died at 59. A healthier Newman may have had a career that equaled his siblings. His final words before he passed is, "I shall soon be over the river." His longtime friend and business partner from Appleton, Robert Morrill, was one of his pallbearers. And his little sidebar, Robert Morrill was the second owner of Appleton's oldest house. So you're probably asking, why does his headstone say Nathan instead of Newman? So in all likelihood, the stonecutter probably made a mistake, and they realized it probably just wasn't worth redoing. And these were humble men that really just didn't feel a need to be memorialized. So yes, there are some blood sisters. So both sisters, Lucy and Lorinda, traveled west with older brother Henry before settling in Appleton. The younger sister spent some time in Lawrence, Kansas with her brothers James and Newman before returning to Appleton. Early settler William Rourke chose Lucy to be his wife. Now you got to remember, in that 1850 census, he had about probably 3 choices for wives at that time. So Lucy died in 1855, and as was common in the day, William married the younger sister in 1860. William Rourke was a prominent land broker and justice of the peace. He died July 13th, 1867. Lorinda Carey Rourke died in February of 1879. All of them are buried together in the family plot in Riverside Cemetery. And you can see the Rourke family marker, and one side of the marker has Lucy and the other side has Lorinda, or Carrie as she was known. And you're probably wondering if Kate Blood is going to be mentioned as part of this presentation. And I only mention it as to set the record straight. Singer and songwriter Trapper Shep penned a song based on the story that the media has blown out of proportion. The song has nothing to do with the real story and little to do with the myth. And after reading the lyrics, I can't seem to make sense out of any of it. So, Kate Blood was far from the villain the legends portray. She was born in 1851, the daughter of Henry and Teresa Blood. She was married to George Miller, publisher of the Appleton Post, no relation to me. Kate died December 29th, 1874, at the age of 23 from tuberculosis, or consumption as it was called back then. She died in Lawrence, Kansas, while staying with her uncles James and Newman, hoping the warm, dry climate might help her recover. Historical records have no evidence of her being involved in any crimes or anything sinister. She was a respected member of the community, and the chilling tales have no basis for historical fact.